Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Howe. I'm a data analyst at Quartz, and I work on our product team to support our news bot development. And today we have an awesome selection of panelists to talk about how to scale customer service bots. So I'm going to try to keep our discussion to around 20 minutes, and hopefully that'll leave around 5 minutes at the end for audience Q&A. I hope that you will take 3 things away from this panel. The first is an understanding of whether or not a customer service chatbot solution is right for you. The second is how to get started if it is, and the third one is trends to look out for in the future in this space. So without further ado, I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Vinay, Chandra, group product manager in the customer success organization at Intuit. And we have a full team. I think our team is here too for the conversation platform, as well as customer success PM teams are here building the bots.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anthony Kunjbehari of LivePerson. So we're a conversational messaging platform provider. Some of the brands that we work with, T-Mobile, Home Depot, Lowe's, and Discover. The last 3 of those brands are particularly notable. They just launched on Apple Business Chat. We're also tied in with the Google RCS equivalent as well.
Hi, I was asked to speak closely, so I overdid it a little bit. My name is Dror Oren. I'm one of the founders, and I run product at Kasisto. We at Kasisto are creating conversational AI, and we're focusing on the financial institutions, backed by and working with some of the largest banks, including Wells Fargo, MasterCard, TD Bank, Standard Chartered, DBS, and a bunch of others.
Hi, everyone. My name's Nikhil. So I work at Autodesk, but Autodesk is primarily known for AutoCAD, Maya, 3ds Max, software that people use in the construction entertainment industries. I work on the Autodesk Virtual Assistant, which is a customer support agent that we built over the past year. My job title is possibly the coolest title I've ever had, which is Conversation Engineer.
Awesome. So the first question I have for each of you is the most simple one. Why should companies consider using chatbots for customer service? What are the main benefits?
I can start.
Go ahead.
So we, first of all, we consider ourselves, conversational AI in the sense that I think we spend a little bit. I know, bots are the thing here, but the way we look at it is kind of like, how do you offer a conversation across, multiple channels, kind of like messaging, obviously being one of them. I would say, there's 2 kind of like obvious things, and we're focusing on customer support here or customer care. There's a lot of other use cases. One is kind of like the obvious, there's ROI from deflecting calls from call center. We work with banks, and we're working with DBS in Singapore, and they have a case study that they published that talks about 82% containment rate. That means 82% of the conversations are actually being handled by the bot, and only 18 are handled by a live person, no pun intended, by like an actual person. And before that, it was 100%, right? People would just call or text, So that's one thing. I think the other thing, and that's where we are extending a little bit, I think kind of like the way we look at customer support, the lines are blurring today. When people call, yes, they want customer support, but they also want to do other stuff that we might not actually call customer support. So, if I'm calling because, I just got hit with a foreign transaction fee, yes, I want maybe to cancel the foreign transaction fee, but I'm also open to applying for a new credit card that has no, foreign transaction fee. So we think that once, again, for banks, opening up this contextual kind of like opportunity is a big opportunity, even beyond kind of like the ROI and deflecting the calls.
Some additional use cases are filling in knowledge gaps. So for instance, when you bring on new team members to the agent population, they're usually going to be very green. They have a very limited scope of knowledge. And so you can complement that with an agent-facing bot. And so that's another really, really elegant way to get bots in your infrastructure and also to start socializing it within the company. I know some companies are very, very resistant to bots because they feel like, hey, it's brand new. I don't want my customers to potentially have a misstep. But a very elegant way of just introducing it to show the power is to have an agent-facing bot to just help them expand their knowledge base and ultimately serve the customer better.
Plus one to all the comments, we are doing exactly the same thing. But one of the key things two things we are focusing on, we have recognized, and one of the key challenges which we have is the silent users who walk away from us. The users who never complain or are unable to reach us for some reason because of the bottleneck in the call centers, which all of us face. How do you make them come into the funnel so that we can really help them? Yes, it increases the call volume, but you come to know the issues they are facing so you can solve them. And that is one area which we think is very important, critical. So bots help us do that because it scales. You can have virtual any number of agents. Even if you have a disaster happening, something is down, all the calls can be handled by the bot, so you can really help the customers. The second one is, how can we route them to the right agent? Because depending on the complexity of your product or your ecosystem, invariably one of the big problems is call transfer. So they reach the agent and then the agent has to transfer to another agent and to another agent. That is really a big bottleneck. So it's not just that the cost which goes up, it's the customer experience really suffers because every time they have to answer, every agent will ask them the same question, what is the problem? And then go through that whole call flow, talking 20, 25 minutes. A typical agent takes 3 to 5 minutes to really understand who the customer is and what they are and what is their problem. That's very expensive. Not from the customer or TNPS perspective, that's very expensive. Forget the business cost itself. So how do you route correctly first time? That is one of the key problems we are trying to solve.
I'd say don't do it. It's a lot of work. It's painful. It doesn't work half of the time. So you're essentially putting up a software solution for people, I think like you said, who are maybe coming in to dispute transaction fees, who are really angry, who are probably going to get angrier if your technology doesn't work well. So think a lot about why you're doing it, what is the problem that you're trying to solve with. Don't do it because everyone else is building a chatbot at school or for those reasons. I think one of the things that really helped us when we were thinking about this is trying to figure out what are the easy things that we can automate and get to these people really quickly. So if you can help them do something that used to take 3 days and now you can do it in 3 seconds, definitely offer that through the chatbot. But if you are going to have some long winding conversational flow which can go wrong at any point, ask yourself if you want to inflict that on these people who already are in a lot of pain.
Yeah, can I, just because it was a little provocative. So I somewhat agree, not with don't do it, but with, kind of like make sure you do the right thing in the sense that, and I would parse it into at least 2 areas. First of all, I think we are not purists in the sense that we don't think that everything should be replaced by a bot, even though we're, conversational AI, and some would argue we have some of like, the deepest kind of like IP. We're a spin out of SRI, it's Stanford Research Institute. We can actually power pretty deep conversations, and still, I think, and like you were saying, as a business, you need to identify where a bot can make a difference. And these things can either be because a bot is a better way, faster way. We power, all kind of like PFM style, personal finance management style questions, right? You can actually go and ask how much I spent on Uber last year, and what about Lyft, and what about this year, and tell me when I'm spending more than $100. These are kind of like use cases that are actually hard to do with traditional UX. So use a bot when it actually does have a 10x increase in either productivity or kind of like gives you access to data that you can't do. I think the other thing is really about the type of the technology, and I might be again being a little provocative here, but I think there are bots and there are bots, and not all bots are created equal. If you want to build the weather bot, there's a lot of frameworks out there, and you can argue about the value, but it will probably work. But if you're a bank, or if you're an insurance company, or if you're looking to solve kind of like deeper types of conversations, yeah, don't do something that doesn't work. If you are implementing an NLP framework that can answer a question and then forget all about it and not hold the context, it's probably not going to end up with a good experience. So kind of like finding the right technology and the right implementation and the right channel is really key.
Yeah, also adding to it, I think one of the key things which we are trying to drive towards is, can we provide a personalized experience to the users? If we are able to identify the user, that is one of the key things. If you are able to identify the user, half the problem itself is solved, and then you can really help them better. That's one of the key learnings we have from our experiments.
Dror, you mentioned that Kasisto focuses specifically on financial services, and I was wondering if you could walk through why the company specifically chose that to focus on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we are kind of like an oldie in this industry in the sense that we spun out of SRI in 2014 and we started working on it. We were basically incubating within SRI through 2013. So we really worked on this thing, and SRI is the company that spun out Siri and Nuance and a bunch of others. We kind of like were born with a deep understanding of what virtual assistance is. And we sat there and said, okay, there's a play in the enterprise world, and which domain are we going to tackle? And these are the days, right? Siri was only out there, no Alexa or Cortana or Google Now, definitely not enterprise kind of like assistants. And we were thinking like, what makes sense? We kind of like, and it's tied to your previous question. We kind of like got to the conclusion that you need a vertical that actually has, pretty high lifetime value for a customer. So it's worth for them to invest in the experience, because in the end of the day, it's about a better experience. The second thing is we actually decided that despite all the advice we got, we actually will go to a regulated, industry, because yes, there's a lot of hardships with regulated industries. On the other hand, it tends to be more repeatable. So, once you abstracted a bank, it's easier to repeat the business and go, from one bank to the other, because, we know about accounts, we know about transactions, we're kind of like aware of these things. And the third thing, we wanted to solve, again, go to a vertical that has like deep problems. If it's about, I think pizza ordering is a very compelling use case, but, is that hard to build a pizza, like a really compelling pizza ordering app? I don't know, go to Domino's Pizza. It's pretty good without a bot. And then they added, a virtual assistant on top of that. Like, it's not that hard. And we were trying to find, a vertical that really have like, deep kind of like conversation back and forth that actually does have granularity, that requires personalization, that requires different access to different answers to different people. And that's how we kind of like, ended up choosing banking. And just to kind of loop, we just looked at some numbers around it, and it turns out banking are actually leading the chart in investing in what's called cognitive computing. So we had the right bet.
Did you want to add to that? I know LivePerson also focuses on specific verticals that are more conducive to the chatbot experience.
Sure. So one thought about finance, they tend to have a lot of money. So in terms of investment, they tend to go, I wouldn't say the earliest in terms of the verticals. The verticals that we've seen really embrace technology the earliest are the telcos. The telcos, from a differentiation standpoint, they'll traditionally go earliest on the leading/bleeding edge, and then once it's proven out there, and actually this speaks to why T-Mobile is such a big client of ours. So once it's proven out there, then we see the Amexes of the world embrace it, because they don't want to go first, because there's a lot of trial and error and iteration going on. So yeah, we do have a lot of verticalization in terms of how we handle accounts, but it's really fascinating to see the commonality and then just this interesting interplay between them.
Yeah.
I think from the vertical, of course, in the vertical side, but if you look at from our industry, we are already in fintech, right? Intuit is in the fintech space, but we are completely focused on customer experience point of view. What are the customer pains? What are the biggest customer pains? And we walk down from that angle, and we realize that routing is one of the biggest pains for our customers. Solve that. Get into other domains like where is bank connection or invoicing or some of the subdomains, handle them one by one so that we can keep reducing that and help in terms of improving our TNPS, our retention, lifetime value. So that is the way we are focusing on going on.
And just to add on to Vinay's excellent answer, What's great about how he's thinking about it, so you have a very simple use case that you automate, and then you have a win, and then you can go and socialize that win internally, because you're always going to have resistors with new technology. And so you socialize that win internally, and then you start to build momentum from a change management standpoint, in addition to from an implementation standpoint. At one point in time, I used to run some implementations for LivePerson, and that's exactly what we did. It's not just how do you implement the technology, but how do you lead change within the organization to embrace it and actually use it.
That's really interesting. So moving on to implementation, Vinay, you talked about, you already touched on how you are currently starting with triaging and trying to get customers to the right customer service agent through the bot. And I was wondering if you could walk through the strategy of how you scoped that out as the initial problem and how you're going to continue expanding QuickBooks chatbot capabilities to address other things.
So we have had initiatives already in place even before we started the chatbot implementation in the customer success, where we have a lot of chat logs from our existing agent transcripts of calls which are happening. We have the the voice calls, all of those are there. We are available, and we have been analyzing all of those data all the time to see how we can improve that experience for our customers. And through those, we are able to figure out the different domain areas which I just talked about, where the biggest pain lies and how, and we were struggling to solve the problem. So that's where we say, okay, where are those issues? Can we solve those domain problems faster? But because it's not just one use case when you say invoicing, it is multiple use cases. If you take banking, they are also like multiple use cases. So where is the real problem? So we had to just look at really the complete flow all the way from customers to the agent and say where we can really first solve the problem and then go backwards. So that was our methodology. We could have gone customer back and say, okay, start solving the problem on this side or domain, but that would take us years, because to train a chatbot to understand a banking issue or an invoicing issue or a payment or a payroll issue will take a while. Mm-hmm. But if we can route them to the correct agent first, we will have enough transcripts, logs, conversation information, which we can pass through machine learning to make the bot more intelligent to be able to start solving these use cases. And that's the reason why the strategy we have is, okay, work backwards from the agent inwards towards this side and solve the domain specific over time.
Nikhil, you mentioned that Autodesk has a slightly different strategy in terms of figuring out how to work with answer transactional questions and then move on to more complex questions over time.
Yeah, I think that goes back to Anthony's point earlier, which is for us, it was really easy to establish value by automating and providing something that was transactional in nature. So something as simple as getting the serial number or activation code for this product that you just purchased from us can be easily done through the bot itself or through a web form. And once you can show people inside the company and outside the company how easy it is to do something like that, you buy yourself more time, resources, whatever, to experiment and provide different kinds of use cases. So from that spectrum, I think there is a spectrum of use cases which spans from like transactional, straightforward like use cases to more conversational use cases that can revolve around content or gathering feedback, collecting data. So I think that is pretty much what we did.
And can I just comment? So obviously, implementation strategies are sometimes driven by the data that's available, right? I mean, what we're seeing here is really, companies, deciding that they want to do a chatbot but don't have data and typically don't have enough kind of like either expertise or ways to bootstrap the data. And, again, one of the things that we one of the reasons we decided to actually focus on a vertical and specifically focus on banking was that when we were born, it's actually after SRI did a very big project with BBVA, where they actually went out and collected, millions of utterances exactly around kind of like how do you, ask about your accounts, how do you ask about your transactions, and we were born with that. So for us, it actually was very easy to bootstrap this kind of like, banking infrastructure, and from there we built, tools. Now it's easier for us to, to bootstrap. So I honestly think that the way the industries or some parts of the industry are going with like, let's start slow and kind of like collect data and go from there is somewhat problematic, because I think it is training or kind of like educating consumers to have a very low kind of like expectation kind of like from the bots. And I think, obviously there's a hype cycle going on right now. People are so disappointed and it's exploding a little bit. I would encourage actually, brands and enterprises to actually try and, again, collect data and do it the right way and not kind of like aim for the lowest kind of like denominator and, in 3 years from now, try to like roll out, a meaningful use case. I think it's a problem.
That's a really great point. One thing that I found really interesting when I was talking with each of you before this session is how your chatbot ends up interfacing with the actual human customer service reps. So, Nikhil, I thought you had a pretty interesting story about how Autodesk's reps use this service.
So I think I mentioned this before, but this is anecdata at the end of the day. For some of the backend transactions that we automated, we received an email once saying this thing used to take like 3 days before and someone else just did it in front of them in about 3 seconds. And they were super impressed by that. And they actually ended up using our chatbot to carry out that transaction themselves so that they can then help a customer when they actually approach it. So in that sense, I think there is the usual robots are going to take all of our jobs, which may or may not happen, I don't know. But what we've seen so far is that they are augmenting what people can do in terms of providing them with easily accessible services or like this external memory bank they can query about help articles, about things that they can't remember maybe off the top of their head. So we are definitely seeing actual customer service representatives use the bot itself to carry out some of their duties. And in like a technological symbiosis of sorts, we have been using some of our customer service reps in turn to help us train the bot better by taking part in like a labeling activity with us over a period of time.
Dror, you also mentioned that to answer the question that Nikhil brought up of if chatbots will ever end up taking over all of our jobs, you mentioned that there are specific instances when you work with clients where there's actually trigger words that immediately hand the conversation to a live person.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, again, like we're not purists in the sense, especially working in an industry like a bank. I think there are situations in which, somebody would like to talk to a person. The bots are not there yet in the trust and kind of like their ability to be trained on everything. So yeah, we have behavioral triggers. So and we also have segmentation, right? So if I'm a platinum customer that says, I think I have fraud, a bank can decide that gets handed over directly to a live person, integration with these kind of like systems. And sometimes it's because somebody is using profanity, and sometimes it's because, so it could be all kind of like behavioral and configurations. And we definitely encourage that. We actually do not go live. So we're live with multiple banks around the world. We never go live without a live agent, handover. We highly recommend it.
Great. So I think we have like 5 more minutes. So for future trends, I wanted to ask each of you, what do you think is the biggest challenge ahead, and what do you think is the most exciting thing ahead?
I think training the bot is the biggest challenge. And yeah, I was just talking to Dennis in the break. As you have these log files, conversation log files, which we have thousands and thousands, which are going to create it in the backlog, how can we reuse them at least in a semi-automated fashion to be able to train the bot? We don't have a solution here. We are looking for it. Somehow over time, if we can come to that in a year or 2, that'll be one of the biggest ones.
So I think it's the multimodal expectation of conversation, which of course bots have to traverse. And it's actually conceptually not a hard problem. The issue is having a common key for each individual so that you know who that person is as they traverse the different endpoints so that you can sew them together. From a technology standpoint, having a record and sewing those keys together, it's no big deal, right? I'm sure many people in this room could write the container for that pretty easily in an hour. It's actually talking to the end user and having them say, yes, I'm willing to give you my Twitter handle in addition to my Facebook UID, in addition to all of these other endpoints, so that you can traverse them in a meaningful way. And then, of course, you unlock the true power of conversational messaging cross-platform. And then, of course, that paves the way for bots to interact in that scenario.
So I think, so you ask for, the challenge and the opportunity. I think in terms of the challenge, I think it still is around data. There's like multiple ways to slice it in our, world. Access to the right data, having the data kind of like, augmented and open and available so that you can ask something like, how much have I spent on restaurants, in New York City last year, is still a challenge, for some banks and all the way to, again, training data and things like that. So I think data strategy is still definitely an issue. I was actually going to mention what you were saying as the opportunity, because I think that, again, at least for us working, with banks actually have multiple, many channels in which, they're already communicating with you. So, an example would be, which, is happening and will continue to happen, why wouldn't I just say, hey, Alexa, for example, remind me when my credit card is due, and Alexa is not proactive. It can't just wake up and remind you. But we have another channel, right? I mean, the bank can send you a push notification when your credit card is due. Why do I need to get the answer there? Or, hey Alexa, how much have I spent on whatever, on Uber? And Alexa can say, okay, I just sent you, on Facebook Messenger, I sent you a breakdown because that's a better way to look at data. So actually, I think there's a huge opportunity in leveraging these channels and the types of communications. And the more we go, the more channels we're going to have. I mean, our car is like, when I'm driving to work, that's where I remember all kind of bills that I didn't pay and things like that. But it's actually pretty hard for me to go and pay it even, with the bot and things like that. So doing these things kind of in a multi-channel contextual way that continues across all these touch points, I think is a big opportunity.
That's interesting because for me or our assistant, it's only on one channel, which is a website that we control completely. And I like saying this a lot because it's true. And our assistant is essentially a gate on a very crowded street. And people are going to need customer support all the time, and they will use us. So we get a lot of rich data out of those interactions. And we are already seeing use cases coming up because of that. We are identifying gaps in our knowledge. We are understanding what products are more popular, what issues are more popular, and so on. So in that sense, one of the things that I would say is challenging is when a problem manifests at a particular point, it can be really easy to rush to try and solve it. But I think it's important to step back and try and recognize if it is actually stemming from that particular thing. So what that means practically for us is over the past year, we've learned that some of the problems that we see in terms of recognition or in our inability to solve some of these problems is because at some level above us, there is a mismatch in the categories, or we've imposed some arbitrary system that forces the users to make some choices. So I don't really know if there's a trend or some insight in there, but I think looking at those problems at a higher level and trying to solve them there is, I think, something we find challenging. And I think that is something that is important to keep in mind.
Great. I think that leaves us 3 minutes for questions.
Hi, my name is Enzo. I'm a developer for Loyalty One. I'm not too sure how to word this question actually, but when it comes to customer care, for someone like me who has a potty mouth, I swear a lot even when I'm happy. So how do you make the bot understand if I am actually being mean or unsatisfied versus being satisfied? We all know some bots have, sentiment analysis and whatnot. Just wanted to get a piece from you guys. And if, actually it's okay, 3 minutes, one question is enough.
Yeah, we actually ran into issues like that when somebody would say, this is effing awesome. Like, is that profanity? You want to go back and say, you seem unhappy, like, most of the world? No, so again, in our world, I mean, in the end of the day, it's the stronger the NLP is, the more you can do things like that, because it's not about keyword searching, it's about understanding, these things better. So, you can try our bots and it's work.
Yeah, conceptually, it's just another dictionary that you'd call upon. Now, granted, you'd need to segment out the users that fit your profile because you don't necessarily want to have that dictionary in play for other people that aren't of that mentality. As in, if the bot's going to be like, F yeah, you don't want that targeted to the wrong person because then that'll alienate them.
Not an easy problem to solve. I'll be very honest, because that's the first thing which gets flagged. And to get that back in through your internal, depending on a company culture, it's not going to be straightforward.
Hi, this is for Nikhil and Vinay. Do you guys use your own homegrown technology for this, or you prefer any platform for your bot building solutions?
I can go first. So we started off with IBM Watson conversation, and I think the person before us just spoke about it. I mean, it's been interesting to see how much you can do. I think Dror brought up this point before, like if you are trying to order pizza, you can use one of those out-of-the-box solutions. But at some point, you are going to want to order something else, or maybe you like pizza, and you just want to try different kinds of pizza, different pizzas from different places. My point being that as your use cases increase, amplify, change, you will see the need to build different things that support them. So right now, we have our own app development team. We have an in-house ML engineering team that has grown and evolved over the past year. We also use open source frameworks. One specifically is Microsoft's adaptive cards, which we are experimenting with so that we can display the same content across different platforms.
Yeah, we have a full team which is building the conversation framework. So we definitely have a full building our own platform. But we do lean on the NLP engines which are in the market, Dialogflow, Lex, and others. We experiment. So our framework is designed in such a way that we can connect to any of the NLP engines. So it's independent of that. But the ML platform, all of those are completely in-house.
Okay, I think that's it. Let's thank our panelists.